For most of my adult life, I believed I had finally escaped the chaos of my childhood. I had a stable job, a quiet routine, and one thing I poured my heart into: a restored classic car that represented years of patience, sacrifice, and discipline. That illusion collapsed in a single phone call. I was staying the night at my best friend's place, halfway through a movie, when my phone buzzed with my parents' number. They never called that late unless something was wrong. The moment I answered, my mother's voice trembled. She told me my younger brother, Jake, had been rushed to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. No details, just panic, just fear. I demanded to know what happened. At first, they avoided the question, speaking in fragments. After pressing harder, the truth spilled out. Jake had taken my fully restored 1970 Chevy Impala without permission, driven drunk, and wrapped it around a tree. I hung up and sat frozen. Rage, disbelief, dread. Every emotion collided at once. That car wasn't just metal and chrome. It was years of savings, overtime shifts, and childhood dreams finally realized. But he was my brother. I told myself none of that mattered if he survived. When I arrived at the hospital, the atmosphere was grim. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, families whispered prayers, and nurses moved with practiced urgency. I found my parents in the waiting room, their faces hollowed by fear. I hugged my mother tightly and asked what condition Jake was in. She inhaled sharply before answering. The doctors had rushed him into emergency surgery. Severe spinal trauma. If he survived, paralysis was a real possibility. The words echoed in my head, heavy and unreal. I sat down, my legs suddenly weak. As I tried to process this, my mind kept drifting. Back to the car, back to the thousands I'd invested, back to all the warnings I'd given him. Then guilt followed immediately. What kind of brother thinks about money when someone might lose their ability to walk? But my mother didn't hear that conflict. She only heard the mention of the car and snapped that it didn't matter, that I should be praying for my brother's life instead of worrying about things. I swallowed my response. This wasn't the time. Yet something old and familiar stirred inside me. This wasn't the first time Jake's recklessness had been excused, or my pain minimized. Memories resurfaced, like the teddy bear I loved as a kid, shredded by the dog Jake begged my parents for. Somehow I was blamed for that too. I remembered cleaning up the mess while Jake faced no consequences. Even back then the pattern was clear. Hours passed. Dawn crept through the windows when a surgeon finally approached us. Jake was alive. Stable. More surgeries ahead. Long recovery. When I saw him lying there, motionless, pale, surrounded by machines, it felt unreal. Like a stranger wearing my brother's face. My parents stayed behind with him. Couldn't. I said my goodbyes and left, unaware that this was only the beginning of a spiral that would unravel my finances, my career, and my relationship with my entire family. I thought the worst part was behind us, but the real damage didn't begin until the insurance company called. The first call from the insurance company came 3 days later. Then another. And another. Each time the reality hit harder. Jake wasn't listed on my policy. He wasn't authorized to drive the car. Because of that, the insurer refused coverage for the vehicle and for the damages caused in the crash. The numbers they quoted felt unreal. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Liability, towing, property damage. Felt sick. I worked as an electrical engineer at a reputable firm. Solid income, steady career, but nowhere near enough to absorb debt like that. Every plan I had carefully built collapsed overnight. I'd been saving to move closer to work, to finally live independently without a soul-crushing commute. That dream evaporated instantly. At work, my performance unraveled. I stared at my monitor for hours without moving the mouse. Deadlines slipped. Drawings were returned for corrections. My supervisor started checking in more often, asking if I was okay. I wasn't. During lunch one afternoon, I overheard a coworker complaining to our manager about having to redo my work. She said it wasn't fair. She was right. Felt like a burden. The stress followed me home. Debt collectors offered payment plans I couldn't afford. I considered selling my house just to survive. Every phone call felt like a punch to the chest. Then Jake called. He was in rehab, his voice weak but sharp. He asked for money to help with medical bills. I laughed bitterly and explained my situation. How I might lose my house. How everything I owned was on the line because of his decision. He snapped. Told me I'd always helped him before, so why not now? When I reminded him why, he cursed me out and hung up. That was when the harassment started. His friends called me heartless. Messages flooded my phone and social media. They mocked my appearance. Said I was nothing without my car. And the worst part, I believed them. That car had been my anchor. When I was young, my grandfather and I were inseparable. One day, flipping through a magazine together, we saw that exact model Impala. He said he wished he could drive one before he died. He never got the chance. Restoring that car felt like finishing his dream. Losing it felt like losing him all over again. I tried explaining everything to mutual friends, but they sided with Jake. He was younger, injured. Family helps family, they said, while ignoring the fact that family had just destroyed me. I felt trapped, angry, exhausted. That's when I decided I needed answers from the one place I'd avoided confronting for years. My parents. I thought confronting my parents would bring understanding, but instead, it revealed a betrayal that went back decades. I went to the hospital late that evening, knowing Jake would be there. Before entering his room, I overheard my parents talking in hushed voices. They were discussing money, how they couldn't increase Jake's allowance anymore because medical bills were draining them. Allowance. The word stopped me cold. When I stepped inside, they froze. I asked them directly what they meant. They tried to deflect, asking about my job, my health. Anything to avoid the question. I didn't let it go. Finally, they admitted the truth. They had been giving Jake a $500 weekly allowance since he was 13. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. I never received an allowance. Not once. I worked part-time jobs, paid my own way, saved every dollar. Meanwhile, Jake had been handed financial freedom his entire life. Suddenly, everything made sense. His recklessness, entitlement, and complete lack of accountability. I felt betrayed. While I was drowning in debt, they were still bailing him out, just like they always had. They tried to justify it. Said he needed more help. That he was different. I didn't care. I left before I said something unforgivable. Months passed. I sold my house at a loss just to clear the debt. It hurt, but the relief was immediate. I moved into a modest apartment closer to work. Jake improved physically, but every visit with my parents turned into an argument. They called me ungrateful. Told me I should be thankful Jake was alive. Jake joined in, blaming me for his condition. My parents excused it as medication, pain, stress, anything but responsibility. I grew distant, bitter, tired. Then came Thanksgiving. Against my better judgment, I attended. When my mother praised Jake's recovery, I snapped. Told him he wouldn't have been injured if he hadn't stolen my car. He slammed his hand on the table and called me heartless. My mother defended him. Like always, I stood up, told her she created this mess, that enabling him for years had consequences. I left and never looked back. I thought walking away would finally bring peace. But my brother wasn't finished destroying what he could reach. After Thanksgiving, I went completely silent. I wrote my parents a letter explaining that I loved them, but their presence in my life caused more harm than good. I told them I was moving and asked them not to look for me. 3 months later, I followed through. New city, new apartment, new job with better pay. For the first time in years, I felt free. I joined a classic car club, traveled, and found another project car. Rough, neglected, but full of potential. I started therapy. The fog began to lift. Then the call came. Authorities informed me my brother had been involved in illegal car flipping schemes, using one of my old credit cards. I immediately closed the account and reported the fraud. That was it. The final thread cut. I felt relief and sadness. Because I knew the chaos hadn't ended. It just wasn't mine anymore. Leaving my family saved me. But the cost of freedom was learning who they really were. Therapy taught me something painful but necessary. Love doesn't excuse harm. Family doesn't mean unlimited access to your life. I rebuilt slowly. My career stabilized. The car project progressed bolt by bolt. Every improvement felt symbolic. Proof that I could restore myself too. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. I stopped explaining myself to people who chose not to understand. I learned peace isn't loud. It's quiet mornings, paid bills, boundaries, and for the first time I chose myself. Sometimes the hardest part of healing isn't letting go. It's realizing you should have done it sooner.